I never thought a simple piece of paper could shatter my world, but that's exactly what happened on a quiet Tuesday morning at my flower shop. The note was tucked between the stems of a fresh delivery of peonies, crisp white paper folded into perfect quarters, like something you'd pass in high school. My name is Kala, and until that moment, I thought I had everything figured out. Successful florist, loving husband, and 16 weeks pregnant with our first child. But life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. Your husband isn't who you think he is. Ask him about Sarah from the Denver office. I read those words at least 10 times, my hands trembling more with each pass. The morning sickness I'd finally gotten over threatened to return as I sank onto my work stool, the scent of flowers suddenly overwhelming. "Hey, boss lady." My assistant Maya's cheerful voice made me jump. I crumpled the note and shoved it into my apron pocket. "Those centerpieces for the Thompson wedding are ready for your final approval." "Thanks, Sal. I'll check them in a minute." I forced a smile, but Maya's expression told me I wasn't fooling anyone. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just pregnancy stuff," I lied, waving her off. "The baby's not a fan of the lily fragrance today." Maya nodded sympathetically and returned to her work, leaving me alone with my thoughts and that damned note burning a hole in my pocket. Declan and I had been married for 3 years. He traveled frequently for his tech executive job, including regular trips to the Denver office. But Sarah? He'd never mentioned Sarah. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." Something cold settled in my chest as I stared at those 7 words. How many times had I received that exact message over the past few months? I'd always trusted him, attributed his late nights to the promotion he'd been chasing. Now every late meeting and business trip took on a sinister new meaning. The bell above the shop door chimed, and I quickly wiped my eyes. An elderly woman walked in, heading straight for the roses. I watched her carefully select a dozen pink ones, her wedding ring catching the light as she examined each bloom. "Anniversary?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as I wrapped her flowers. 52 years today," she beamed. "My Harold still brings me flowers every week, but I thought I'd surprise him this time." "That's beautiful," I managed, though my throat felt tight. "He's a lucky man." After she left, I pulled out the note again. The paper was expensive, the kind used in corporate offices. The handwriting was neat but distinctive, definitely a woman's. I took a photo with my phone before carefully refolding it. That evening, I sat at our dining room table until 9, pushing food around my plate. When Declan finally came home, his tie was loose and his hair slightly disheveled. He kissed my cheek, smelling of unfamiliar cologne. "You didn't have to wait up, honey," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "You need your rest." "I wanted to," I replied, studying his face. "How was your day?" "Busy. The Denver team's giving us trouble with the merger." He loosened his tie further. "Actually, I might need to fly out there next week." My heart skipped a beat. "Denver? Will you be working with Sarah?" The pause was brief, barely a second, but it was enough. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes before he answered. "Sarah? I don't think I know a Sarah in that office." In that moment, watching my husband lie so effortlessly to my face, I realized 2 things. The anonymous note was real, and the man I married was a stranger. As he headed upstairs to shower, I placed a hand over my growing belly and made a silent promise to our child. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I spent the next morning going through old photos on my phone, searching for any hint of Sarah in the background of Declan's work events. My sister Avery sat across from me at her kitchen table, her coffee growing cold as she watched me spiral. "You need to eat something," she said, pushing a plate of toast toward me. "The baby needs more than your anxiety for breakfast." I ignored the toast but rubbed my growing belly absently. He lied to my face, Ave. About Sarah. I saw it in his eyes. "Men lie about all sorts of things," Avery said, reaching for my phone. "But jumping to conclusions won't help. What else has changed recently?" I thought about it while she scrolled through my photos. The late night started about 3 months ago. New cologne, Private phone calls. God, I'm such a cliché. You're not. Avery stopped scrolling suddenly, her expression changing. Wait, is this from the company Christmas party? She turned the phone to show me a group photo. Declan stood near the edge, his arm around a tall woman with auburn hair. They weren't touching inappropriately, but something about their body language made my stomach turn. That's Sarah, I whispered, recognizing her from her LinkedIn profile that I'd found last night. He said he didn't know her. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Avery went to answer it, and I heard Evelyn's voice in the hallway. My mother-in-law appeared moments later, carrying a casserole dish and wearing a concerned expression. Declan called, she said, setting down the dish. He's worried about you. Said you've been acting strange and sleeping at Avery's. Did he mention why I might be upset? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Evelyn sat down, her perfectly manicured hands folded on the table. No, but I'm not blind, dear. Something's wrong, isn't it? I slid my phone across the table, showing her the Christmas party photo. Do you know her? Evelyn studied the image, her face carefully neutral. Sarah Winters. She's new to the Denver office. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I met her at the Hendersons' anniversary party last month. Declan didn't mention she'd be there. Declan claims he doesn't know her at all. Something flickered across Evelyn's face, disappointment, maybe anger. She opened her mouth to respond, but was interrupted by my phone buzzing. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. Check his credit card statements. Dinner for two at La Maison Rouge every Thursday night. My hands shook as I showed the message to Avery and Evelyn. La Maison Rouge was the most expensive French restaurant in the city, definitely not where Declan's usual business meetings took place. I need to see those statements, I said, standing up. They're in his home office. Calla, wait. Evelyn caught my arm. Let me talk to him first. If what you're suggesting is true. No. I cut her off. I need to know for myself. I drove home in a daze, rehearsing what I'd say if Declan was there. But the house was empty, his car gone from the driveway. In his office, I found the statements easily. He'd never bothered hiding them before. Every Thursday for the past 3 months, La Maison Rouge, $300 plus. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Check the jewelry store receipt in his jacket pocket. The one from last week. I froze, remembering the navy blazer he'd worn to work yesterday. It was still draped over his office chair. With trembling fingers, I reached into the pocket and pulled out a crumpled receipt. A diamond bracelet, worth more than I made in 2 months at the flower shop. I'd never received a diamond bracelet. The front door opened downstairs, followed by Declan's footsteps. Gaya, are you home? I stood there, receipt in one hand, credit card statements in the other, as his footsteps approached the office. In that moment, I made a decision. I quickly took photos of everything and slipped the evidence back where I'd found it. There you are, he said from the doorway, smiling that perfect smile that used to make me weak in the knees. What are you doing in here? I forced myself to smile back. Just looking for a pen. My hand unconsciously moved to protect my belly. Actually, I was thinking about dinner. How about La Maison Rouge on Thursday? His smile faltered just for a second, but it was all the confirmation I needed. Thursday night arrived with the weight of inevitability. I sat in my car across from La Maison Rouge, watching the valet parking area through a light drizzle. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, and the baby kicked restlessly, sensing my tension. Declan's silver Mercedes pulled up right on schedule. I watched him step out, straightening his tie before walking around to open the passenger door. Sarah emerged in a sleek black dress, her hand lingering on his arm as they walked inside. The diamond bracelet sparkled on her wrist. My phone buzzed. Avery, don't do anything crazy. Think of the baby. I texted back, just gathering evidence. But we both knew I was lying. Inside, I gave the maitre d' my name. I'm meeting my husband, Declan Rivers. His eyes widened slightly. Monsieur Rivers? He's already seated with a guest. I know, I said quietly. That's why I'm here. He led me through the restaurant, past candlelit tables and intimate conversations. I spotted them in a corner booth, their heads close together over a bottle of expensive wine. Declan was laughing at something Sarah had said, his hand resting on hers. "Your table, madam," the maitre d' announced loudly. Declan's head snapped up. The color drained from his face as I slid into the booth next to Sarah, who jerked her hand away from his like she'd been burned. "Don't stop on my account," I said, picking up a menu. "The Coke au vin looks amazing. Is that what you usually order here? Every Thursday?" "Calla," Declan started, his voice strained. "This isn't. We're discussing work." "Really?" I turned to Sarah. "The bracelet was for work too? It looks lovely on you, by the way. Though I imagine it's awkward wearing jewelry from another woman's husband." Sarah stood abruptly, gathering her purse. "I should go." "Please don't," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I have questions. Like how long you've been sleeping with my husband, before or after you found out I was pregnant." The restaurant had grown quiet, nearby diners pretending not to watch the drama unfolding. Declan reached across the table, his face a mask of controlled panic. "You're making a scene," he hissed. "Think about my reputation." "Your reputation?" I laughed, the sound hollow. "I'm thinking about our child. The one you apparently forgot about while buying expensive dinners and jewelry for your mistress." Sarah bolted then, leaving her wine glass half full. Declan started to rise, his eyes following her, and something inside me snapped. I grabbed his wine glass and emptied it over his pristine white shirt. "Go ahead," I said. "Chase after her. Show everyone exactly who you are." He sat back down, jaw clenched. "You're being hysterical. This isn't good for the baby." "Don't you dare," I whispered, tears finally spilling. "Don't pretend you care about this baby when you've been—" My voice caught as a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. I gasped, clutching my stomach as another wave hit. Declan's anger turned to alarm. "Kaya? What's wrong?" "I don't." The room started spinning. Something's not right. Through the haze of pain, I heard Declan calling for help. Someone mentioned an ambulance. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Evelyn rushing through the restaurant doors, her face a storm of fury directed at her son. I woke up in the hospital to the steady beep of monitors and Dr. Lin's concerned face. He explained that stress and elevated blood pressure had caused complications, but the baby was stable for now. Strict bed rest was mandatory. Evelyn sat in the corner, her usual perfect posture rigid with tension. "Declan's in the waiting room," she said quietly. "I told him to stay out until you're ready." "I'll never be ready," I whispered, touching my belly. "How do you face someone who's destroyed everything you believed in?" "You don't," she replied, taking my hand. "You focus on healing, and then you make them face the consequences of their actions." The monitor's steady beeping filled the silence as I closed my eyes, remembering those anonymous notes that had started everything. I still didn't know who sent them, but I was beginning to understand why. Some truths need to be exposed, no matter how painful the revelation. 3 days into my hospital stay, Dr. Lin delivered news that made my heart stop. "The placenta is showing signs of distress," he said, pointing to areas on the ultrasound screen. "Your blood pressure isn't stabilizing the way we'd hoped." I clutched the thin hospital blanket, trying to steady my voice. "What does that mean for the baby?" "It means choices, Kala." He sat on the edge of my bed, his kind face serious. "You need absolute rest and zero stress for the remainder of your pregnancy. That means no work, no confrontations, and definitely no more restaurant incidents." A soft knock interrupted us. Declan stood in the doorway, wearing a fresh suit and carrying a bouquet of roses, store-bought, not from my shop. Dr. Lin excused himself, giving Declan a look I couldn't quite read. "The nurses said you're not eating," Declan said, placing the flowers beside my bed. "Funny how betrayal kills the appetite." He sighed, loosening his tie. "I've been thinking, maybe we should try counseling." "Now you want counseling?" I laughed bitterly. "After I end up in the hospital?" "I want to fix this," he said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Fix what, exactly? The affair? The lies? Or just her public image? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. Another anonymous text. Check his email. Password is Sarah's birthday, 0517. My heart raced as I deleted the message. Declan was watching me closely. Who was that? Avery, I lied. She's bringing me some things from home. He nodded, but something in his expression changed. I need to get back to the office. Graham called an emergency meeting about the Denver merger. After he left, I pulled out my laptop. My hands shook as I typed in his email password. It worked. Dozens of emails between him and Sarah filled the screen, dating back 6 months. They were careful, using coded language about project deadlines and client meetings, but some messages were more explicit. Plans for a weekend getaway. Photos. Promises. A new email notification popped up from Graham Henderson to all senior staff. My blood ran cold as I read it. Effective immediately, all Denver office operations will be relocated to our Singapore branch. Staff transfers will be finalized by end of month. Another message appeared below it, from Sarah to Declan. We need to talk. Now. I was still staring at the screen when Evelyn arrived. One look at my face, and she closed the door behind her. What did he do now? I turned the laptop toward her. She read in silence, her expression hardening. Singapore, she finally said. He was planning to leave. The baby and I were just inconvenient obstacles. My voice cracked. He never wanted this family. Evelyn's phone rang. Graham Henderson's name flashed on the screen. She answered on speaker. Evelyn, is Cal with you? She needs to hear this. I'm here, I said. I just fired your husband, Graham said without preamble. The board discovered he's been falsifying reports to cover unauthorized expenses. The Denver merger was his excuse to embezzle company funds. The monitor beside my bed started beeping faster as my blood pressure spiked. How long? Evelyn demanded. At least 6 months. Sarah Winters was helping him hide the transactions. They're both being investigated. Dr. Lin rushed in, alarmed by the monitors. He took one look at my vitals and ordered everyone out. Wait, I called to Graham. Who sent the anonymous notes? Who exposed them? There was a pause on the line. That would be my wife. She oversees all executive expenses. When she saw the pattern, the rest of his words faded as Dr. Lin injected something into my fore. As consciousness slipped away, I heard him telling Evelyn they might need to consider early delivery if my condition didn't improve. In my last moments of awareness, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't going to save my baby. I needed to let go of Declan's betrayal and focus on survival, not just for me, but for the innocent life depending on my choices. The monitors slowly steadied as I made my decision. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Some victories come from walking away. 2 weeks after being released from the hospital, I found myself standing in our walk-in closet, staring at the dress Declan had insisted I wear to tonight's company gala. Despite Dr. Lin's orders for bed rest, Declan had been relentless about my attendance. It's crucial for appearances, he'd said that morning. The board needs to see we're still a united front. The dress was new, emerald green silk that probably cost more than a week's worth of flower shop revenue. A peace offering, or maybe just another attempt to control the narrative. My phone buzzed. Another anonymous text. Sarah will be there tonight. So will the FBI. I deleted the message just as Declan appeared in the doorway. You're not dressed yet? I shouldn't be going at all, I said, one hand resting on my expanded belly. Dr. Lin was clear about Dash. Dr. Lin doesn't understand what's at stake. Declan's voice was tight, controlled. 2 hours. That's all I'm asking. Then you can come home and rest. The way he said home made something twist inside me. This house hadn't felt like home since the first note appeared in my flower shop. At the gala, Declan kept his hand firmly on my lower back, steering me through crowds of executives and their spouses. Their smiles felt practiced, their eyes calculating. Everyone knew about his firing, about the investigation, but nobody dared mention it. Mrs. Rivers, Graham Henderson appeared beside us, his wife Patricia close behind. You look lovely tonight, though I must say, I'm surprised to see you here given your condition. Declan's hand tightened on my back. We wouldn't miss it. In fact, I was hoping to discuss Dash. I don't believe we have anything to discuss. Graham cut him off coldly. Patricia, why don't you show Calla to the terrace? Some fresh air might do her good. Before Declan could object, Patricia led me away. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed skin. The agents are already here, Patricia said quietly, nodding toward two men in dark suits by the bar. They're waiting for Sarah to arrive. She agreed to turn state's evidence. My legs wobbled. Patricia guided me to a chair. You knew, I whispered. You sent the notes. She squeezed my hand. I've seen too many good people destroyed by men like Declan. When I found the discrepancies, the terrace doors burst open. Sarah strode out, her face pale but determined. Behind her, Declan looked like he'd seen a ghost. Tell her, Sarah demanded, her voice shaking. Tell your wife what you promised me. Declan stepped forward, his facade cracking. Sarah, don't dash. He said you lost the baby. Sarah turned to me, tears in her eyes. He said you had a miscarriage months ago, but were pretending to still be pregnant to trap him. That's why he needed the money, to start over with me in Singapore. The world tilted. Through the roaring in my ears, I heard gasps from the growing crowd of onlookers. The FBI agents moved closer. Is that what you told everyone? My voice sounded strange, distant. That I'm crazy? Faking a pregnancy while you played the sympathetic husband. Calla, I can explain Dash. Mr. Rivers. One of the agents stepped forward. We need you to come with us. Everything happened fast after that. Declan trying to run. The agents catching him. Sarah crying as she handed over documents. Graham making statements to the press gathering outside. Through it all, I sat perfectly still, one hand pressed against my very real, very active baby, who chose that moment to kick hard enough to make me gasp. Evelyn appeared with my coat and car keys. Let's get you home, dear. Not that house, I said, standing carefully. I can't go back there. She nodded, understanding. Then we'll go somewhere new, somewhere you can both heal. As we left through a side entrance, I caught a glimpse of Declan being led to a waiting car, handcuffed and defeated. Our eyes met briefly. In that moment, I realized something important. Revenge hadn't brought me peace, but the truth had set me free. My baby kicked again, stronger this time. A survivor's kick. Like mother, like child. The morning after the gala, I sat in Graham Henderson's office, watching him review security footage from the company's parking garage. On the screen, Declan and Sarah hurriedly loaded boxes into his car 3 nights before the arrest. Financial records, offshore account details, Graham explained, pausing the video. They were planning to destroy everything before the FBI caught up with them. I touched my belly, feeling sick. How much did he steal? Nearly $4 million. Graham slid a folder across his desk. But that's not why I asked you here. These are the texts between Declan and the board members. My hands shook as I read messages where Declan had systematically painted me as unstable, delusional. He'd convinced everyone I'd lost the baby months ago but couldn't accept it, claiming my mental state was why he needed to handle all our finances. He was setting me up, I whispered. If everything went wrong, you'd be the perfect scapegoat. Graham's voice was gentle. A grieving, mentally unstable wife who forged his signatures while he tried to protect you. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the lie. A sharp pain followed, making me gasp. Kaya? Graham stood, concerned. Should I call Dr. Lin? I'm fine, I lied, but another pain hit, stronger this time. Within minutes, I was in an ambulance, Evelyn holding my hand while paramedics monitored my vitals. Dr. Lin met us at the hospital, his face grim as he reviewed the readings. The stress has triggered early labor, he said. We need to stop it. You're only at 30 weeks. Hours passed in a blur of medications and monitors. Avery arrived, then Patricia Henderson. Through the haze of pain and fear, I heard them discussing Declan's bail hearing. He's claiming temporary insanity, Evelyn said quietly. His lawyer wants Callow's medical records to prove she's unstable. He can't, Avery protested. After everything he's done. Another contraction silenced their conversation. Dr. Lin checked the monitors, shaking his head. The medications aren't working, he announced. We need to prepare for delivery. It's too soon, I pleaded, panic rising. The baby's not ready. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. If we wait. The rest of his words faded as reality crashed in. This was Declan's final betrayal, not just destroying our marriage or my reputation, but potentially our child's chance at a healthy life. A nurse appeared with admission papers. As I signed them, she handed me an envelope. This came for you at the front desk. Inside was a familiar piece of white paper, but this note wasn't anonymous. I'm sorry for my part in all this. I never knew about the baby. He told me so many lies. Sarah. The paper crumpled in my fist as another contraction hit. Through the window, I could see reporters gathering outside the hospital. Someone had leaked the story. Don't let them in, I gasped. Don't let them turn this into another headline. Nobody's getting past me, Avery promised, her voice fierce. You focus on my niece or nephew. Dr. Lin started preparing for the emergency C-section. As they wheeled me towards surgery, Evelyn stopped us. Graham just called, she said. Declan made bail. His lawyer's requesting an emergency hearing about custody, claiming you're not fit. The monitor screamed as my blood pressure spiked again. Dr. Lin ordered everyone out, shouting for additional medication. In that moment, lying there while they rushed to save my baby, I realized how completely Declan had orchestrated my destruction. Even from jail, he was still trying to control the narrative, to paint me as the villain in his story. Stay with us, Calla, Dr. Lin urged as my vision began to blur. Your baby needs you to fight. Fight. That's what I've been doing since the first note appeared in my flower shop. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about survival. For me, for my child, for the truth itself. As they pushed me into surgery, I made one final promise to my baby. We would write our own story, and Declan wouldn't be the author of either of our fates. 3 days after my emergency C-section, I woke to find Evelyn sitting beside my hospital bed, her face drawn with worry. My daughter, Rose, was still in the NICU, fighting for every breath, but getting stronger each day. Declan's here, Evelyn said quietly. He's demanding to see the baby. I tried to sit up, wincing at the pain from my incision. He can't dash. I know. Security's keeping him in the waiting room, but... She hesitated. There's something you need to know about my son. She pulled out an old photograph, a young Declan, maybe 7, standing between 2 adults I didn't recognize. His foster parents, Evelyn explained. Before I adopted him. They were embezzlers too, convinced Declan to help them forge documents. When they were caught, they abandoned him, claimed he'd tricked them. The pieces started falling into place. That's why he tried to frame me? He repeats patterns when he's scared. But that doesn't excuse Dash. A commotion outside interrupted her. Declan burst in, followed by security guards and Avery, who looked ready for war. Where is she? He demanded. Where's my daughter? Sir, you need to leave. A guard started, but I held up my hand. Let him stay. The room cleared except for Evelyn, who stood protectively beside my bed. Declan looked terrible, unshaven, suit wrinkled, eyes wild. The lawyers say I have rights, he said. You can't keep her from me. Rights? My voice shook. Like my right to a safe pregnancy? My right not to be gaslight and betrayed. I never meant. He ran his hands through his disheveled hair. Everything just spiraled. Sarah, the money, the lies. I couldn't stop. Like your foster parents couldn't stop? He flinched as if I'd struck him. Mother, what did you tell her? The truth, Evelyn said firmly. Something you should try sometime. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Rivers? Your daughter's oxygen levels are improving. Would you like to see her? Declan stepped forward, but I shook my head. My name is McBride now, and only I'm going to see her. She's my child, too. His composure cracked. You can't erase me like they did. No one's erasing you, Declan, I said quietly. You did that yourself. Every lie, every betrayal, every attempt to make me look crazy, those were your choices. I'll fight you for custody, he threatened, but his voice wavered. With what? I asked. Your embezzlement charges? Your documented attempts to frame me? The text messages to the board calling me mentally unstable. He slumped against the wall, the fight draining from him. I don't know how to fix this. Start by fixing yourself, Evelyn said. Turn yourself in, take responsibility. Show your daughter who you really are, not who you're pretending to be. A soft knock interrupted us. Dr. Lynn stood in the doorway with Graham Henderson and 2 FBI agents. Time to go, Mr. Rivers, one agent said. Your bail's been revoked. As they led him away, Declan turned back. Her middle name, he said softly. Could it be Evelyn? After the only parent who never gave up on me? I looked at his mother, saw the tears in her eyes, and nodded. Not for him, but for the woman who'd chosen to love an abandoned child, who'd stood by me when that child lost his way. Rose Evelyn McBride, I said. A name with both roots and new beginnings. After he was gone, I let the nurse wheel me to the NICU. Through the incubator glass, I watched my daughter's tiny chest rise and fall, each breath a victory. You're nothing like them, Evelyn said, touching the glass. Either set of parents. You chose truth over revenge, strength over bitterness. I placed my hand over hers. We all have patterns, don't we? The trick is knowing which ones to break. In the quiet beeping of the NICU monitors, I found peace in that broken pattern, in the knowledge that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of the past to protect the future. 6 months after Rose came home from the NICU, I reopened my flower shop. The morning sun streamed through the windows as I arranged fresh peonies, the same flowers that had held that first anonymous note so long ago. Those are pretty, Avery said, bouncing Rose on her hip. My daughter's laugh, still new and precious, filled the shop. But maybe we should stick with roses, given her name? I smiled, touching a soft peony petal. Sometimes beautiful things can bring painful memories and hope at the same time. The bell chimed as Patricia Henderson entered, carrying a familiar white envelope. This came to our office, she said, handing it to me. Declan's lawyer asked us to forward it. I'd heard he'd taken a plea deal, was serving time while attending intensive therapy. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. You don't have to read it, Avery said quietly. But I did. I needed to know how the story ended. Inside was a letter, along with legal documents signing away his parental rights. His handwriting was different, less controlled, more honest somehow. Gaia. The therapist says I should start with the truth, so here it is. I was terrified of becoming my foster parents. Every lie I told, every betrayal, was me running from their shadow. But in trying to escape their pattern, I created my own. Rose deserves better than a father who might repeat that cycle. She deserves the strength and honesty you've shown. I'm signing away my rights not because I don't love her, but because I love her enough to protect her from my demons while I learn to fight them. Take care of our daughter. Tell her whatever truth you think is right when she's older. And know that despite everything I did, you were always stronger than any lie I could tell. Declan. Evelyn arrived as I finished reading, carrying coffee and pastries. She'd been my rock these past months, proving that family isn't always about blood or broken promises. He's doing the work, she said, seeing the letter in my hands. Real work this time. I know, I replied, watching Rose grab at a sunflower with tiny, determined fingers. But some breaks can't be unbroken. The morning crowd began trickling in, regular customers who'd stood by me through the scandal. New faces drawn by the story of renewal in the local paper. I helped them choose flowers for celebrations, apologies, fresh starts. Graham Henderson stopped by later, not for flowers but with news. Sarah's testimony helped recover most of the stolen funds. The board voted to establish a trust for Rose's education. You didn't have to do that, I said. No, he agreed. But sometimes justice looks like giving someone a future untainted by the past. As the day wound down, I sat at my workbench, designing arrangements for a wedding. Rose slept peacefully in her carrier, surrounded by the scent of flowers and new beginnings. Avery had gone home, but Evelyn lingered, arranging roses with surprising skill. You know, she said, healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means growing something new from broken ground. I looked around my shop, at the flowers that had held the first warning, at the daughter who emerged from the final crisis, at the chosen family who helped me survive it all. The desire for revenge had faded, replaced by something stronger, the peace of choosing my own path. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for showing me that patterns can be broken. S. I deleted Sarah's message without responding. Some chapters need to stay closed, even as new ones begin. Rose stirred, reaching up with perfect tiny fingers. As I lifted her, a peony petal drifted down, landing in her open palm. She clutched it, not destroying but holding, teaching me one final lesson about beauty and strength. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or dealing justice. Sometimes it's about proving that broken things can bloom again, different but whole, in gardens of their own making. I tucked the petal into my daughter's baby book, marking not an ending, but a continuation, our story growing wild and free, exactly as it should.